A titration is a method of analysis that allows us to determine the endpoint of a reaction, which in turn allows us to determine the quantity of reactant in the titration flask. To perform a titration, a burette is used to deliver the second reactant to the flask, and an indicator is used to detect the endpoint of the reaction. An indicator is defined as a substance that undergoes distinct observable change when the conditions of its solution change. This is the proper setup of a titration lab. Remember to always prime the burette before performing the titration. This is done by rinsing it with water and then the solution 3 times each. Then, fill the burette with titrant solution of a known concentration and check for air bubbles and leaks before proceeding with the titration. Prepare the solution to be analyzed by placing it in a clean Erlenmeyer flask or beaker and add the indicator. Kendall Curtis can be seen taking the initial volume by observing where the bottom of the meniscus is. She then records the volume to 2 decimal places on a piece of paper. She then uses the burette to deliver a stream of titrant to within a couple of milliliters of the expected endpoint. The indicator can be seen changing color when the titrant hits the solution in the flask, but the color change disappears upon stirring. When she reaches the endpoint, Kendall reads the final volume in the burette and records it to 2 decimal places. This process will be redemonstrated by Lauren Brashear and then Zena Banker. While they are demonstrating, please listen to some helpful tips about how to not go past the endpoint when carrying out titration experiments. Approach the endpoint very slowly and watch the color of your flask carefully. When approaching the endpoint, a partial drop of titrant may need to be added. This can be done with a rapid spin of the stopcock from a horizontal closed position to a vertical open position and then back to horizontal, or by partially opening the stopcock and rinsing the partial drop into the flask with a wash bottle. Make sure to know what the endpoint should look like. For phenolphthalein, which is used in this video, the endpoint is the first permanent pale pink. It is very easy to tell when you have gone past the endpoint. But the cool thing about science is that experiments are repeatable, so it's okay if you fail the first time. Almost everybody does. After all the observations have been made, subtract the initial volume from the final volume to determine the amount of titrant delivered. Use this, the concentration of the titrant, and the stoichiometry of the titration reaction to calculate the number of moles of reactant in your analyte solution. And that is how the titration is done. You have reached the end point of this video. Congratulations.